Script. You have a chisel and you have a hammer, and the easiest way is to start on the right and to go to the left. If you're writing with ink, and if you're a right-handed person, and you start on the right, you would smudge everything. So on the West, where people began to do it this way, they started to, that became a simple thing. If you do a brush, Chinese, you'd be going down. Starting on top and go down. So do you see how the lines are different? So that in each case, it's the medium that creates the form in which the message is being offered. And so in Hebrew, 10 Commandments, thou shalt, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so it starts with lapidary script, and it has remained that way. And in Arabic, it's also going from right to left, okay? Now look at the table of contents, and what do you see? You just had it. Alphabetical index. See that? Mm-hmm. So, a lot of the words that you find here will be in Hebrew, because the people who will attend services will understand. So, for instance, when you come to a monastery, you'll find that you'll see the words matins. Now, even if you don't speak Latin, you'll understand that this has something to do with the morning prayer. For us, matins is shacharit, and you'll see that SH we have to get with a shachar. See, let's take a look. I better take a look at my book, and then I can guide you around it. As it begins on top with the afternoon service, it's only because of the alphabetical index that you have it this way. And that's how people most of the time find their way around. But if you were to go, let's say, to page 2, which is a little bit later on, after all the information as to who was on the committee, who did this and who did that, and you find the same thing in all hymnals. That's the meeting of the Presbyterian Society, okay? So on page 2 you see Shacharit service. Do you see that on top? Notice that H with a H inside, yeah? The dot inside. That makes it a ha. Shacharit, Hanukkah, and so on and so forth. You get that sound, okay? And look how it begins. Upon arising in the morning, we acknowledge God's presence and compassion. And so, go ahead, read that line. I'm grateful.
Which one? Sorry. Am I on the right page? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't expect you to read it to you.
Good. I'm grateful to you, living, enduring King, for restoring my soul to me in compassion. You are faithful beyond measure.
So you get the idea. Person wakes up in the morning and it begins with that. And then if you follow through, look on the bottom of the page, weekday services, morning service, 156. Not until you get to page 164, you get to the afternoon service. The notion was that the morning service is the longest one. It leads, that's where we start to a tune. And it has, I wish I had a blackboard here, feeling like class. So I could indicate to you that the rabbis talk about the 4 levels of Jacob's ladder. So they say the prayer has to do something with how you engage the body, how you engage your feeling, your heart, how you engage your mind, and how you engage your soul. These are the 4 levels in which you go up in the morning prayer. So take a look how you engage the body. We're going to go back to page 10. earlier. Page 6, 7. Yeah, on the English side, okay? See where it says we are grateful for the gift of the body. So you read this one.
Okay. Praised are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who with wisdom fashioned the human body, creating openings, arteries, glands, and organs, marvelous in structure, intricate in design. Should but one of them, by being blocked or opened, fail to function, it would be impossible to exist. Praised are you, Lord, healer of all flesh, who sustains our bodies in wondrous ways.
Isn't that wonderful? Where the notion of that is that if you do this not only verbally, but if you accompany your words with attention, because the word that's being used for prayer has to be done with kavanah. Kavanah is intention, focus, attention. So when I say the words here, the translation isn't so good, because the Hebrew puts it so beautifully. Galui veyadua lifnei kisei kevodecha, which translates as, I'm totally transparent to you. Everything is open to you. You know, it's like if you were to check, most of us have some places inside of ourselves where we don't want God to see us. Mm-hmm. That's right from the beginning of the story of Adam and Eve, remember? In the garden, and then they hid at this point. And all of us have the sense that there's some things which we don't want to show. But in the morning, if we want healing, if we want to get well, we have to become transparent and say, invite God as the healing force. And the Hebrew says, and also again, in wondrous ways, but in Hebrew it becomes even more strong by saying that in the miraculous order. That's to say that while medicine may not have an answer for it, but in the miraculous order it is possible for spontaneous remissions and stuff of this sort. Okay? All right, I'll wait another few minutes before we're going to start looking around, but let's take a look at the next page. On the bottom of page 9, and now you read for us.
The soul which you, my God, have given me is pure. You created it.
Oh, and Tanakh?
Go ahead.
You created it, you formed it. You breathed it into me. You keep body and soul together. One day you will take my soul from me, to restore it to me in life eternal. So long as this soul is within me, I acknowledge you, Lord, my God, my ancestors' God, Master of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Lord, who restores the soul to the lifeless, exhausted body.
Now, the interesting thing is that in most systems, when you use words for soul, spirit, and so on and so forth, it has to do with breath. In Hebrew, you have 3 words for what gets usually translated as soul. One of it is nefesh, which translates literally an out-breath. Ruach, holding the breath, wind. Pneuma, and the original meaning of spirit, wind. And then there is the in-breath, neshama. As it says in the Bible, and he breathed into his nostrils of life, like a baby with the first breath, breathing in at this point, and that's called neshama. So these 3 things are soul words, and they're also breath words, and that's interesting for those who are interested in how pranayama connects, okay? Let's make quickly a look at page 11. And look where that number of blessings are on the right-hand side. And they say, praised are you, Lord of God, King of the universe, who enables his creatures to distinguish between night and day. All the people who are translating want to make it so pretty for you. But if you go literal, you give the rooster the understanding to know the difference between day and night, you know? So most of us don't live in a place where we have roosters around. But could you imagine when you're in bed and you hear the rooster in the morning, or the garbage collectors coming around early in the morning to pick it up. You hear the sound, people are out there, something is out there, a new day is beginning. And then you give thanks for the sight of the eyes, for the straightness of the body, for the earth in which you can stand, all these body blessings, okay? I think we have everybody here now. All right.
I just want to welcome everyone to our spring series of interreligious explorations at Naropa University. And it is an incredible pleasure to have Rabbi Zalman be with us. He was our World Wisdom Chair, for those of you who are new to Naropa, for many years. And we very much didn't want to lose contact with him, so we're so delighted that he's coming back to us at least twice a year to bestow his amazing, gentleness with us. I feel like he's an uncle to the Naropa community, so I feel it's a real treasure to have him be part of our series, and it's also delightful that he has invited us into his arena rather than people coming to Naropa, so I think it's a true gift. So it's with great pleasure that I'm so happy we're all here, and I look forward to this.
And with me is Rabbi Zvi, whom you know, who teaches
Jewish mysticism?
louder.
Jewish mysticism.
Okay. He's right with that thing, you know, because there's a teaching that goes, how did God create light? He wrapped himself in a prayer shawl, and the light streamed forth. Why do you have to whisper? So it's already written in Scripture. He wraps himself with light as with a garment. What do you need to whisper it for? He says, but when I was taught it, I was taught in a whisper, I give it over in a whisper. Which means that what you give over in a whisper means don't take it literally. Okay. Now this is a deep metaphor. You have to attune to it, just like you have to go like this to hear the whisper. Okay. Well, imagine I'm coming into the synagogue like a very traditional person. I have washed my hands beforehand. Way back, when people didn't wear shoes, they would wash their hands and their feet just the same way as it is in a mosque before people start praying. And so it's written in the Bible that the priests were to wash their hands and their feet before entering the sanctuary. Okay. One of the sentences would go, Erchatz b'nekayon kapai v'asova v'mizbachacha Hashem, I wash my hands in purity, and I will circumambulate your altars. If you have ever been to a Roman Catholic sacristy, you know, the room where the priest puts the robes on, he has something there. And it's called lavabo manis meum inter innocentis, you know. I wash my feet, the same sentence here, so entering in. There usually is like a genuflection you'll find in a church. If it is done right, a person would sort of bow in the direction of the ark. Where are the mountains? There, in the west. That shows that the ark is in the east. And that's what you call orientation. Get that? To the orient. And way back, when people had built the cathedrals, they tried to orient them in the same way toward the east. And there were the great, beautiful Rosetta windows there. So you can imagine you're in Reims in France, and morning has broken, and a big psychedelic stuff comes in that great mandala that you would see in all blazing colors there. We just have that one here. But it's nice in the morning because sometimes you can see the light reflected right there. Okay. So you come into the synagogue and you take one of the gray books, and you take one of the red books. The gray book is the prayer book, and most of the things get recited in Hebrew in this synagogue, and many other synagogues that way. Because Hebrew is seen as a holy tongue, it's a sense like you get, how would I put it? When you make a telephone call, they want to know, are you speaking in French or in Spanish or in English or something like this? Press this button, press that button. You get closer to the boss when you do it in Hebrew. That's the understanding. Because when God created the world in Hebrew. You'll hear that kind of thing from Bhartahari about Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. Everybody says that their language was the sacred language with which the world was created. Okay. So, when you do Hebrew, you don't do it talking like an Episcopalian, like Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. You say, I Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, right? There's always cantillation connected. In reading the Torah, there's cantillation. In reading the prophets, there's cantillation. So no wonder that when you hear a muezzin calling out, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and so on and so forth, it'll always be with that kind of inflection in the chant. Okay. So, the idea is that the prayers are directed toward the east, and the same way as you would find some Muslims will carry a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Compass with them to know where the Qibla is, to turn into the right direction to Mecca. The notion was that in the place where the great manifestation of God, the giving of the law, or a place of a temple where God decided that there would be the sanctuary where God would dwell therein, that was a special opening and gate to heaven. Same thing you have seen, that there are many sacred places in the world, and people who have had apparitions, you find that among Roman Catholics very strong. Our Lady of Lima, for instance, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the sense that there was something that came through. There is the veil between heaven and earth is much thinner there, and so prayers have an easier way of ascending. For us, it's Jerusalem. Now, what's in the ark? We'll take out a Torah in a moment, and I'll show it to you. And since the Torah is seen as a repository of the Word of God, what you get is almost, I'm giving a primitive way of saying this, that every word and letter of this was dictated by God to Moses. And so we are speaking of the 5 books of Moses. And so there is a teaching that the rabbi said that the first statement that God makes to the people, Anochi, I am the Lord your God, he's saying, I have written myself in the book. You can find me in this book. No wonder, therefore, that someone like Muhammad, peace upon him, would say that there are some people who have contact with the book. The people of the book is a very important connection there, okay? So I'll open it up. What you will see that when people take the Torah out, there's a procession with the Torah to the synagogue, and people will touch it and sometimes kiss the hem of the Torah as if to say, sacred object. Have you ever seen a priest putting on a stole? He will take the stole and kiss it too and put it over his shoulder the same way, meaning that sacred objects are being given the reverence of that, to say this is a gift, this is a special grace that I have the opportunity to wear this, to hold it. Here you have a prayer shawl. The usual ones are these here, and some of them are even smaller, and I make fun of them and I say that's a bikini. I like the big ones because the notion of a bigger prayer shawl like this one here is that at least if you were to go out, like sometimes you have a nightmare, you're not wearing anything, right? But if you had a tallis, you could wrap yourself in it, okay? A toga, in a way. And if you've seen His Holiness Dalai Lama, he has such a cloth too, above, which is another way of saying an aura container. I don't want to be influenced by lots of stuff from outside. What would you say about the tallis?
Well, in the tradition, the tallis is connected to particularly the divine presence, the feminine presence, and the Shekhinah is the word that's used, the indwelling presence, the immanent expression of the Absolute. And so when we wrap ourselves in the tallis, we're also invoking or inviting that presence to surround us and hold us, so that our intention, our prayer, our inner experience can be permeable, more permeable to spirit.
Rabbi Zvi, on purpose, I didn't put my hearing aids in. So you must speak louder, which is also good for the camera, okay?
Got it.
All right. So when I put this on, I will first of all take a look and see if the fringes are in good shape, if they're all there. They have to be done in a very special way because they're reminders. They're look-ats. If I translate the word tzitzit, there's something to look at. And it says, put a blue thread on those fringes, and you will see him. The Hebrew says, uritem oto. And the simple meaning is you'll see the blue thread. But the people who have learned how to tie this wanted to make sure that, for instance, this has 10 windings, this has 5 windings, this has 6 windings, this has 5 windings. What does it stand for? In Hebrew, the alphabet is also the numbers. So 10 is Yod, the Jah. 5 is Hey, Vav is 6, 5 is Hey, and the divine name is Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. In other words, when I look at the fringes and the winding, get that? I'm reminded, okay. When you put it on, we are told to put it on, and it's interesting how the Jewish code of law puts it. You're to put it on like the Ishmaelites wrapped themselves. So, meaning like Arabs, like a kafia, that was the original thing. So you go like this first. Get that? And if I had one of those things around here, it would be like a kafia. Usually people don't wear it, keep it on their head most of the time, unless you're very much involved in deep prayer. Then you go put it over your head, because you want to be sort of free of distractions. Most of the time people put them like this over their shoulder, so that the hands are free. During the morning, during the week, this is important, since the Torah says, in that part which is the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, it says, and it shall be a sign on your arm, and put frontlets between your eyes. Well, let me spell this one out. Let me see, who has read the Gospels? You guys ought to at least get to know, the basic literature of religion in America. Otherwise, you won't understand what's being said. When Obama was talking last night, or yesterday, he gave such a remarkable speech, but the background in which he was talking about that minister would not be understood if you don't sometimes know what's in the gospel and what's not. In the gospel it says, feed the hungry, mind the poor, take him into your home, just like it says in Isaiah before him. And doesn't say anything about birth control. So if you know what's in those books, and there Jesus was talking about the Pharisees who have big, and they translate it as phylacteries, but that's a Greek word, and when you translate it as phylacteries, it doesn't tell you anything. The Hebrew word is tefillin, related to the word for prayer, tefillah, and so it represents prayer gear. Those of us who are interested in acupuncture can find out that those places where, and there was something on the web about that, those places where the tefillin are placed, watch over here on my head, not really between my eyes, but at that place where a baby's head is soft, you know, and over here to the occiput, the knot. And now you see me here, almost ready for prayer in the morning. I will also take these windings around, and I will recite a beautiful sentence that says, "And I betroth thee unto me forever, in righteousness, in justice, and in grace, and in truth." And so you have a sense of going back to our covenant with God, okay? Now I'm in gear. I'll let you look at them a little closer, and I'll go over to the camera so he can focus on it. And later on, you'll have that as part of your collection in the library, so you can look at it again, okay? Now, I began before telling you that in the prayer book, we have 4 parts, and the first one deals with the body. Now, I'll take you to another place. Go to page 87. And look at where it says Psalm 147. Do you see it there? All right. And now leave the books on the chair and stand up, and you'll sing with me, okay? When I call out, you are going to respond with Hallelujah. It's Michael wrote the Boulder short, but without the rhythm, okay? You know that, so I don't have to teach you anything new. I'll go a little bit higher so you can develop your voice better. Hallelujah. Could I urge you for some harmony, please? Hallelujah. Oh, you're so timid. Chosen people, not chosen people. So, next song, please, a little bit louder. Hallelujah. It's getting better. There's some sopranos who are hiding in the closet. Hallelujah. Oh, you're still too timid. Louder, please. Let me hear you strong. Imagine you're with Sister Act, you know? So respond strong. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord from the heavens. Hallelujah. Praise God from the highest places. Hallelujah. Praise God, sun and moon. Hallelujah. Praise God, you stars of light. Hallelujah. Mountains and all hills. Hallelujah. Oh, the little mountains. Fruit trees and tall redwoods. Hallelujah. Beasts wild and tame. Hallelujah. Creeping things and winged birds. Hallelujah. Praise God from the earth. Hallelujah. Whales and guppies too. Hallelujah. Fire and hail, storm and wind. Hallelujah. Rain that comes and fertilizes the earth. Are kings of the earth and all nations. Hallelujah. Candidates and congressmen. Hallelujah. Young men and maidens. Hallelujah. Old folks and little kids. Let them all praise the name of the Lord. Hallelujah. For in praising we too are raised to higher feelings. Hallelujah. Vayarim keren le'amo. Hallelujah. Tila lechol chasidam l'nei Yisrael am kerovo. Another grand amen. Amen. Oi, go sit down. But you see, I can't expect of you that immediately you'll do things. But could you imagine that week after week people come to synagogue and they know the responses and they won't sing this one particularly. This is what I use when I try to tell people what's in the prayer book over here. But you see, what I was just singing with you is already found here. A little bit more fancy language than the one that I used. But that's because most of the people who translate prayer books translate for the head and not for the heart. There was a time after the Vatican II began to allow people to say the prayers in the vernacular before it was always in Latin, that there were beautiful poets around. Thomas Merton was one of them, Philip Berrigan and Joseph. And they didn't turn to them. They turned to some very prosaic people to translate the Mass. And for a while they called it the Yuhu Mass, because the prayers would begin, you who creates the world, you who does this, was known as the Yuhu Mass. But they wanted to be so literal in the translation for the head, and that didn't allow the heart to get in. And that's always a problem with the translation. So that when the people are saying the prayers in Hebrew, they feel much closer to allow, because it doesn't stare them in the face with that language. Then they're able, when they come to the kings of the earth and all the nations, then they're not only talking about that, they're talking about officials, and CEOs and everybody else, who are bossing people around, and that comes in. There is a section that brings us a little bit later on to the Exodus from Egypt. I'll show you the page. You may have seen Moses and the Ten Commandments by Cecil B. DeMille. Once you see that, you can't read the Bible straight anymore. You already hear the voice. When he made that movie, he wanted to make sure that when God speaks, it was Cecil B. DeMille himself. Because he was the director and the producer of that. Okay. But here, every day we are supposed to remember that we are to be free and not to be slaves, and that we were redeemed by God from Egypt, and this freedom comes. And then we have, look on page 95. I'm telling you these things because some of these are specific to Judaism, but from time to time I will tell you, as I'm about to do right now, that it's this notion of public worship and how it goes on, it has a more universal element to it. For instance, in many, you may have attended some church in which the priest or minister was saying, "The Lord be with you," and what did the people say?
And also with you.
Say it louder.
And also with you.
Also with you, and sometimes they would say, "and with your spirit." And it all began in the book of Ruth, where Boaz comes to the field and he speaks to his workers and says, "The Lord be with you." And they say, "May God bless you." So when they answer, Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo, and with your spirit and with your being too. Why do they do this several times in the middle of the Mass? What this is, they're gathering consent, and they're saying, we are moving from one element of the prayer situation into the next one. You see, we were in the place of the body with the morning blessings, and now we came to the place of the heart with the celebration of God and nature and in our lives. And now we are moving to a place that's a lot more conceptual. And so we have the half a Kaddish, which is a way of saying, magnified, sanctified be God's great name. And people come with their response, and they say Amen to all these things. And then he says, praise the Lord who is to be praised, Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach, and people bow at that point. And then they stand upright and they answer, may God be praised, now and forevermore. And you'll hear these words, you'll find them in many prayer books the same way. And then begins a prayer that says, you create light, heavenly bodies, and then come the angels. And you look on page 99 on top, and you may have from time to time heard a hymn, Holy, holy, holy. Now where did this come from? Beautiful image. Isaiah is almost a young boy, not quite a grown man. But he has a vision that he comes into the temple of God. And the temple is no longer a building, a physical building, but something vast. And there on a great throne, he sees God, surrounded by a group of angels that are called seraphim. You may have seen that word seraphim for those angels. Translated, it means the burning ones. No, he describes that those seraphim have 6 wings. 6 wings. And with 2, the description, you may have seen some pictures, some emblems in some churches of something that looks like an angel. He covers with 2 wings, the face with 2 wings, the legs, and with 2 wings he flies. You may have seen that. It's carved on many statues in churches and so on and so forth that you will see those seraphim. But could you imagine those seraphim raising their wings in adoration? All 6 of them. What do they look like? The candelabra, the menorah with the 6 wings, okay? So here you have that, and it gets recited, holy, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, the whole world is filled with his glory. As in the prophet's vision, soaring celestial creatures roar and respond with a chorus of adoration. Praise be the glory of the Lord. How would you say holy, holy, holy in Latin? Sanctus, 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 Dominus Deus Sabaoth, plenis und caeli terra gloria tua. And that's when the people who wrote music for the Mass, like Bach and Mozart and all the other people, they knew that they had to be, first of all, an entreating of God. Please, have mercy, Lord have mercy. What do you call that? Kyrie eleison, they were saying this in Greek. And then they were having the prayers at the foot of the altar. And then they got up to that place that's called the Sanctus, see? And then they had other prayers that would be like the Credo. I believe in this and that, and so on and so forth. And so, very much, that has been modeled on the prayer book that you have over here, because it was so much of the church service was modeling what was going on in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and there too the Sanctus was something that the Levites were chanting and with great music, and the people would stand in adoration as they would hear those words. A little bit later in the prayer book, look on page 101. We formally affirm the sovereignty, God's sovereignty freely, pledging him our loyalty. We are his witnesses. And then they say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Take the word witness. You're going to be, it's not an easy time to learn about Islam, but the likelihood is that if you will, sooner or later, we need to learn more about it so that we can have dialogue with the more liberal elements in Islam and recognize what they have and what we share together. Notice the word witnessing. When someone wants to convert to Islam, he has to make a shihada, which is a witness, saying, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah, wa Muhammad Rasulullah, and Muhammad is his messenger. You get the idea? That's taken again from that kind of a statement of witnessing, saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is our God. Yud Hey Vav Hey. Lord is a bad translation, but we aren't supposed to pronounce that name. So it means the ever-being one, the one who makes being happen. He is our God, and he is one. And that statement of the oneness was a very powerful statement at one time, and it's even a stronger statement today. At one time, when you had polytheism, there were many gods around. And so if you have read about the Roman gods and so on and so forth, and even if you go with people who would say the Tibetan Buddhism doesn't have any gods, and then they'll talk about the hungry gods, and they'll talk about the fierce gods, and the benign ones, and so on and so forth. There are many, and early on, the gods always had forms of animals. They were zoomorphic gods, Nandi the bull, Ganesha, and Hanuman, and Anubis, and so on and so forth, in Mithraism. So when that statement was made, the Lord our God, invisible, and yet he is one, that was the way in which they stood against the polytheism of that time. Today it has a deeper meaning because we are now talking from a point of view, at least if you're a chassid, you're a Jewish mysticism, you would be talking a lot more from a monistic, not just monotheistic, but monistic point of view. So who are we? We are manifestations of God with different faces and different names, but it's all, there's a bigger one than the one that we said before. But then it says, and thou shalt love that Lord, that God, with all your heart, with all your soul, all thy might. And that is a way of saying, of a dedication. And it speaks of how, let me read you a more modern translation of that. It would go something like this. Listen, you Israel person. Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one, unique, all there is. Love Yah, who is your God, and what your heart is, and what you aspire to, and what you have made your own. May these values which I connect with your life be implanted in your feelings. Watch that, it's an important word. You have a lot of values, but sometimes we don't feel them, and if we don't feel them, we don't act on them, right? May they become the norm for you and your children. Address them in the privacy of your home and on the errands you run. May they help you relax and activate you to be productive. Display them visibly on your arm and let them focus your attention. And if this were not a synagogue, but a private home, we would have over here a mezuzah, that little thing on the door, in which this passage is written for a reminder. So people would kiss a mezuzah that way when they come in. And in my home, I have a mezuzah that I bought from a Radio Shack and put the little parchment that had to be handwritten in there. You press a button and it says, "Wake up as you cross this threshold." But that's the whole point of it, to become more aware, to become really always more aware. This is to look at, to become more aware. So now we go a little farther. I'm taking you quickly through this journey. Go to page 111. Again, they're trying to emulate the Book of Common Prayer of the Episcopalians, and so where they used to use the words vouchsafe and bestow, all these fancy words. You graciously endow mortals with intelligence. And then it says, bring us back to your Torah, forgive us where we have sinned, behold our affliction, etc. That's the shopping list. Because afterwards it begins to pray for strength, for healing, for abundance of nature and commerce, for being redeemed from oppression, from being gathered, to be gathered with your family and your friends in the Holy Land, for bringing justice about in the world, because, this is one that I put a lot of heart in, so that the Supreme Court, they're now looking at the issue whether the city of Washington has a right to limit the carrying of concealed weapons. What a stupidity not to realize what the Second Amendment really tried to do at one time, and today so many killings are happening because guns are free, and people are saying, but it's in the Constitution, it was put there. So they don't want to let them take it out or limit it. So that's another thing. So when I pray about justice, I keep stuff like that in mind. Then we pray a prayer against terror, and then for all righteous effort in the world, for Jerusalem to be rebuilt, and for the messianic time in which the world will be at peace, and so on and so forth. In the end, it still says, listen to our prayer, and that's time for private prayer. Now let's say today is Wednesday, so we wouldn't be reading the Torah normally. But tomorrow, when we have finished this part of prayer, someone is going to be called to take the Torah out. Please, sir. And we'll be then chanting, Vayehi b'neso'aron, Vayomer Moshe. And there's a little one. The big one is too heavy. Yeah, there's a string on the right side. And so usually when that happens, people stand up. You can sit, but I want you to understand why. It is a way of saying, I want to honor this Torah, this document. And you come around here, and this is sort of a breastplate, and right here, there's a little box. And engraved there it says Sabbath. Because sometimes when it's a holy day, this is a scroll. And the scroll you can't say go to page so-and-so. You have to roll it until you get to the right spot, right? So before the service, the beadle will prepare the thing and then put into this slot over here to say that this is the one to be read for new moon or for the holiday and so on and so forth. These here are called pomegranates. For sometimes you have a real big one here, like see the crown?
Yes.
All of which is to say that we consider just as a king, sovereign, is the one above us, so the Torah wearing the crown is the one above us. I used to do a little ring around the Torah, the children dance the Torah wears a great big crown, all fall down. Get that? Because in a sense of obeisance, paying obeisance. Now, we're going to put the Torah on the table here, and then I'll ask you to come up and take a look. In the meantime, the scroll which we'll read tomorrow evening around is a scroll of Esther. All right, I'll leave it over here. So, gather around. Oh yes, here you go. Want to read a little bit? Just a few psukim over here. At first, someone is going to call you. If you attend the synagogue, and they'll say, "May so-and-so come and come up, rise up, be called to the reading of the Torah." Most people nowadays have someone else read for them, but they say a blessing beforehand, saying, "Thank you, God, for giving us this Torah, this teaching," and then, having said this blessing, the reader will say, "Amen," and go ahead.
Amen. Vayikra el Moshe, Vayidaber Adonai elav, me'ohel moed lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, ve'amarta aleihem Adam, ki akriv mikem korban Adonai, min ha'behema, min ha'bakar, umin hatzon, takrivu et korbanchem.
So you heard the melody, and now when I imagine I was just called, and he points to the place where he finished, I go like this, and I say the other blessing. Thank you for having given us here a Torah of truth. And then someone will come and lift it up and roll it together, and then we'll wrap it up and put the coat of it on. Now come and look a little closer, please. Hold here, please. There was a statement in the Gospels where Jesus was saying, not one jot and one tittle of this law will pass away. Now what's a jot and what's a tittle? Okay. So take a look, here's a jot. See this tiny letter, it's the smallest letter that there is. That's the letter Yud, jot. And if you look on top of these little points that come up here, see, like crow's feet, those are the tittles. So when Jesus was saying you must honor the law, not one jot and one tittle of this law will pass away, he tries very clearly to say that I'm not coming to upset the apple cart, you know, that this law is to hold. So notice here there are some space. First, look closer. Do you see those lines here? They're very faint.
White?
You can't, they're sort of done with a stylus. You have it clearly, more clearly on, will you bring the scroll? Can can you imagine this is handwritten? It takes quite a while, and every letter, if a letter of this is false or missing, you know, then you have to, then it's unfit for reading. It has to be really done by hand. Now here you can see it clearly.
Oh,
See those
yeah.
lines? Those are done with a stylus so that the scribe will stay within, you know, to justify the lines. This is not so easy. So we always plan ahead. Do you remember that thing? Yeah? So you have to know how to be able to finish always so. So you'll see some letters will be drawn longer. See this one over here? In order to manage to justify the lines. Over here again. There's an interesting thing about the way in which this Torah is written. Not all of them, but most of them are written that way, that the first letter on each one of those columns is a vav, which means and, and so on and so forth. A way of saying, and this is good when you have a council, when people sit and talk, and you have a talking stick, to be able to get to the place where you announce you want to talk, you don't say but, you always say and, okay? And is such a wonderful word because it is including the other thing. I'm not fighting against you. And so we call this the consecutive vav, the and that always says and more and more and more and more. So every one of these begins. This book, on the other hand, deals with the story of the king Ahasuerus and the queen Esther. And here every column begins with the word Hamelech, the king. Not the first one, because it's not there, but all the other ones begin with that, which is very interesting because it wants to talk about an earthly kingdom and keep you in mind about a heavenly kingdom. So here too you have the jot, and you have the little tittles over the letters. Okay, I'll put this away. Get back to your seats, and that Zvi will help me. Okay. The pointer is, use a silver pointer, so you don't use your cotton picking fingers to, you know? Good. Couple of more things I want to show you that we won't have that much time for. On the High Holy Days, we blow the shofar. I brought this big one, it's a beautiful one, and it has a good tone. But as I told you, hang in. I used to do it a lot better than that.
You've seen the other kind of shofar. This is a really big one, but there's also, typically in a synagogue you'll see a smaller one,
Yeah.
which is just like a smaller horn, and they have very different sounds. This sound is much deeper. The smaller ones have a much higher pitched sound.
Mm-hmm. As you would find with different trumpets too, you know. This is a tuba of a shofar.
Yeah.
Okay. There's something else I want to show you that we use once a year, and I'm going to have to watch out here because this is not the season for it. But during the harvest festival, we take a palm branch and willow and myrtle, and this is shriveled now and dried. But could you imagine if this were fresh with a skin like a lemon? And we hold these together, and shake him into all directions, right, left, front, back, up and down. And those of you who have had any connection with Native American stuff understand about the thing about the directions. And really, you don't need to be a Freudian to understand what that stands for, right? So the scepter and the orb of kingship is the same thing. When a king gets, I stayed up all night long, long ago when Queen Elizabeth was being crowned. And here I saw this young woman being taken to the cathedral and transformed into a queen. And these venerable people came, bowed before her, crowned her with the crown, gave her the scepter and the orb. And you get the sense that this represents the masculine, the feminine principle. You know, very much like you would go into the stupa, and there you would be able to see how these things are done with under different forms. Okay, so if I had the time, I would take you around the calendar, because that's one of the things that would be very helpful for you to understand how various religions use time. We go by a solar-lunar calendar. Islam goes by the lunar calendar alone, which means that 11 days are missing each year, so therefore Ramadan travels around the year. The Christian calendar now goes according to the solar year. The Jewish calendar goes by the lunar year, but what do you do about those days that are missing? So once every few years you add an extra month. And today we are, as you will watch the moon, very close to the full moon of the 13th month of this year. Get that? Which evens it out so that Passover will be always close to the full moon of the vernal equinox and Sukkot to the full moon of the autumnal equinox. Then you have Rosh Hashanah, the new year that begins in the fall. You have Passover that you know about, but there is Yom Kippur right after Rosh Hashanah, after New Year, and then comes the feast, the harvest feast, when we have the booths and when we use these things. It's a very shamanic thing. And when was it? In early 90s in Rio, when there was a summit, the Earth Summit, and we all got 6 minutes for each religion to present. The Dalai Lama got 20 minutes. It's okay. I love him anyway. You know? Oh boy, are they making stupid stuff in China about that. When he has really, forgive me, I just gotta say it. When he has said that he doesn't want the political autonomy, but the spiritual and cultural autonomy for his people, and they still don't want to buy that. They can't wait until he dies so that they can appoint another Dalai Lama in his place. What's so sad with the Olympics coming up. Anyway, I love him very much. So he had 20 minutes. But when my time came, I should do something about Earth with Judaism, I took one of these and moved it in all those directions. And 2 people stood with ram's horns in each direction that I turned it in prayer. And I asked all the people to join me in prayer for the earth, that earth would heal. I would say it in Hebrew, and they would say, Señor, ten piedad de nosotros, or whatever form they would say it. And it was so powerful, and I didn't need 6 minutes, but people understood, because very often the shamanic element in religion has been put aside and people are not paying enough attention. Now, you have some questions and so on and so forth. Comrade Zvi, I'm going to sit down a little bit and rest, and you answer.
Okay, so we covered a lot of ground. Anybody have any questions? reflections?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like you to elaborate.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. Did everyone hear?
Yes.
The
Please
question,
repeat.
the question was to elaborate more on the lulav and the etrog, which are used.
Careful to me, don't- Because I had to sweep up before.
Oh, okay.
If you would give me the spelling
Yeah.
for the words.
Sure, yeah. This is a date palm branch, which is called the lulav, L-U-L-A-V. It's a Hebrew word from the Bible, and this is a citron. It's in the lemon family, yeah, and it's called an etrog in Hebrew. Etrog, E-T-R-O-G. And this lulav is it's old, yeah. It's from this past early fall when the festival of Sukkot fell out, and so it's kind of withered. And there are two sets of branches on either side. On one side are what's called in Hebrew aravot, which are willow leaves, willow branches from the willow plant that grows alongside the river. And the other side is filled with what's called the hadassim in Hebrew, which would be a myrtle from the myrtle plant. So they're myrtle branches. And so these four elements are known in the tradition as the four species that are in the Torah. It's the people are called to bring these four species together, to bring them together during this festival. And so we take the lulav, the date palm, we take the hadassim, the myrtle, the aravot, the willow, and the etrog, the citron, and we literally bring them together into our hands, place them as one unit, and then shake in a particular motion these four species in actually 6 directions. Yeah, so we go east, east, south, west, north, and then up and down, also up towards the heavens, down to the earth. And so we're kind of there's a lot that we could say about the inner meaning of this ritual, but on a basic level, we're bringing this act of unification ritualistically, connecting it to the earth, connecting it to creation, and bringing that unity into all directions of reality in some way. And when actually in the tradition, when you shake them, you point it out, shake, and then bring it towards your heart. Yeah, 3 times in each direction. So the shaking is somehow connecting this this representation of reality also into the person's inner experience, into their heart. And also each one of these species represents a different part of the body in the tradition. So this would be the spine, this would be the heart. The hadassim, the leaves of the myrtle branch, are shaped like the eyes, and the leaves of the willow branch are shaped like the lips. They're long lips, yeah? So it's like we're unifying the eyes, the body representing in the spine, the mouth that speaks, and the heart that feels. So it's an ancient, one could say, ritual of inner and outer unification. Does that make sense?
It's not talking about the 4 species that I talked about and bring them together.
That's exactly what it is. These are the 4 species that are brought together, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Verse 3.
The element.
What is this?
What is this?
Yes.
Can anybody guess?
Donation box?
Yes, exactly. It's called a tzedakah box, which is a charity box. So there's a tradition every morning before you pray, at certain points in the prayer service actually, you would give a little tzedakah, a little bit of charity. So, yeah.
As if to say, if I'm allowing myself to offer something to someone else, today there's no other form of sacrifice available, and some of this will go either for the maintenance of the synagogue, or because on the Sabbath, you know, the big services, we can't pass a plate. So that's done during the week, and most of the time it goes for the poor. Okay, there was another question coming up.
I wondered if you could describe over a week's time, if I were an observant Jew, what my opportunities to come to synagogue would be, and Reb Zalman mentioned Thursday night something happens, and if you could just describe what opportunities there were for worship during the week.
Sure, yeah.
Would you repeat, please?
Sure, yeah. The question was, what opportunities would there be for an observant Jew during the week to come to synagogue and observe? So there's, traditionally speaking, there are 3 prayer services a day. And to this day, in a very traditional community, there would be prayer service at the synagogue 3 times a day, because there is a requirement to pray with a quorum of 10 fellow Jews. So
He is kind, and the more patriarchal thing, 10 men.
yeah.
But in the new and liberal circles, we can speak of 10 people.
Yeah. So those would be the opportunities. Reb Zalman mentioned Thursday morning, because on Mondays and Thursday mornings, those are the days during the week that the Torah is taken out of the ark and read from in community, in addition to the reading on Sabbath morning.
But then there's Friday night and Saturday morning.
Friday night there would be a prayer service, but the Torah is not read. And Saturday morning there would be another prayer service. We call it davening, yeah? Davening is prayer. So that we would daven Friday night, and we would daven Shabbos morning, Sabbath morning, and Saturday morning as well as in the afternoon on the Sabbath. So, in a traditional Jewish community, the synagogue is really a focal point, as you could see. Yeah, you're in many, communities to this day, Jews will go to synagogue 3 times a day.
The traditional word was, take the word synagogue, a Greek translation of Beit Knesset, a gathering house. Okay, like the long hut, for Native Americans. That's what the same way, for instance, mosque is called the kneeling place, masjid, where you kneel, where you pray. So this is called the house of gathering, Beit Knesset.
Yes, so someone else? Sarah, did you want to?
I'm still a little unclear of the function of the tefillin.
Tefillin, yeah.
Tefillin
Very good.
and the tefillin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a very fascinating kind of thing that we don't see too often these days. But in some ways, there are a lot of ways of understanding what it is. But in some ways, it's a spiritual technology. It's almost like antennas in some way. Yeah, one could say, to tune in to the divine presence, to tune in to align our bodies, to bridge our bodies with larger reality, with God, would be the way the tradition would say it. Within the boxes on the arm and the head, there are specific scrolls, very much like the Torah scroll, but tiny, smaller. And there are 4 scrolls in each box, actually. And on each of those scrolls contains is written also in the same kind of traditional writing as the Torah is written, specific sections of the Torah. So included is the section that Reb Zalman read about, you shall love the Lord thy God, the Ahavta section, as well as others.
If you figure, would a prayer wheel be a good prayer wheel if it didn't have a holy text in it? No, it would be empty. A prayer flag that didn't have anything on it would be empty. You get the idea?
Yeah.
A mezuzah that doesn't have the little parchment in it is empty. And so these have 4 little sections on parchment written there too. And again, with the same intention, and if one letter is missing, and if they weren't written in a particular order, and so on and so forth, that they don't contain, how would I say, it would be as if a chip is missing in your computer.
And is there significance to the placing on the, I mean, you talked a little bit about the head. I'm wondering about I'm curious about the placement on the arm and the different wraps.
Yeah, so there is, it's based on the passage in the Bible that says, "You shall place it as a sign upon your arm, and as frontlets between your eyes." In the tradition, there are very specific places that you put them on your bicep, close to the attachment site by the radius, and just where Rabbi Zalman put the head piece, just about where the hairline begins, and the placement parallels the head and the heart, basically, tapping into, perhaps allowing for a deeper opening of the head center and the heart center, to prepare oneself for a deeper prayer experience and connection with God.
I think we're going to declare it officially over. We are not leaving yet, but those of you who have to leave, so you can feel free to go, and we'll stick around a little bit longer to answer some questions. Any other issues that you want to bring up?
Seraphim, you said that it is the angel with 6 wings, and so imagine the wings going up, and it's like menorah. Menorah has 8. Would you like to?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's not a that's.
Explain about the Isur of the 7.
Yeah. So the menorah or the candelabra that was in the temple actually had 3 on each side, not 4. There is a tradition not to have a replica of the candelabra that was in the temple in Jerusalem.
An exact replica.
An exact replica. So very often in synagogues you'll have, an 8-branched candelabra, which is the candelabra that's used during the festival of Hanukkah. Have you heard of Hanukkah? Where an 8-branched candelabra is lit. So in synagogues you'll often see the 8-branch rather than the 7. 6 on each side with the middle one. So the 6, when Rabbi Zalman was referring to the 6 wings, he's referring back to the candelabra that existed in the temple. Candelabra. That's fancy name for the
candle holder.
Candle holder.
And if you look at the Ark of Titus, in Rome, where they show how they plundered the temple in Jerusalem, and there on one thing they're carrying out that 7-branched one from the temple, and that's where in the state of Israel on its seal you'll also find that same 7-branched, not the.
Yeah.
So that makes me ask you why it is not allowed to keep that original symbol.
In order to show that we don't at this point have a valid temple. It's interesting, if you go to St. John the Divine in New York, you'll find 2 big ones standing on each side, and they are 7-branched ones. Because they feel that the cathedral is like the temple, and we don't have it yet.
There seems to be an emphasis in Judaism on connecting with the divine, sometimes through a spiritual device, but also in the practices. And so I'm curious about why one can't mention the name of God, because it seems that the pronunciation of the word would be a wonderful way to connect with the meaning behind the word.
Yeah, that's a great question. Should I take a shot at that?
Sure.
The name of God was actually pronounced at one time under very, very specific conditions. It was only at a certain time of year in the temple pronounced by the high priest in the presence of the people. And the understanding was that, if you read the very beginning of the Torah, the emphasis on the power of the word, of speech, is so fundamental. You know, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or, Vayehi Or, God said, let there be light, and there was light, right? So the world in some sense was created through the power of speech. So there's a great reverence for the power of speech. The name for God that is not pronounced in the